Game Informer's been doing a whole bunch. They went to Japan for Street Fighter 6. 118 rapid questions with the lead director and producer. These were the guys that I've spoken to the most about Street Fighter 6 as well, from those launch events and stuff like that. Very cool dudes. They seem like they genuinely give a shit about Street Fighter, as we can tell. They were the guys that led those events that were at the end of Street Fighter 5's life cycle. Funny enough, we've been watching these dudes spearhead the Street Fighter, the Capcom fighting game division for the past 2 years already, right? It was indeed August 2022 where there was like a clear different focus of where Street Fighter and Capcom were going with their fighting games, you know? Also, Nakayama-san was one of the responsible for getting the Capcom artwork Twitter up and running. He's pretty much the guy that did that. I have a lot of respect for these dudes, and I think I'm very excited about where Capcom fighting games are going from this point forward.
Are you a good sport?
もちろん。
Have you ever seen a real street fight?
あるね、あります。
If all the Street
These are
Fighter
weird
characters
questions.
had a fighting tournament in real life, who do you think would win?
ガイル。
Do you think Dan would win any fights?
あると思う。あると思う。
Who do you think you could beat?
なんかラッキーでいろいろなことが起きて勝てるような、ことがあります。
What do the other characters think of Dan?
どうってんだろうね。面白いやつだと思ってると思います。
Do you watch any kind of real fighting?
はい、見ます。
Do you take any real life inspiration to create any of these fighters?
あります。
Which Street Fighter character would you most like to see compete in MMA?
ルークはすごい意識して。
Yeah, Luke was supposed to be MMA-like.
What was your first experience with Street Fighter?
すごい面白いゲームに出会ったっていう感じ。
思った通りの動きができる。
そうそうそう、キャラクターが大きい。
What is the best Street Fighter game?
俺はあれだな、ストリートファイター。
Champion Edition. I feel like I have to reiterate what Championship Edition is, right? Or Champion Edition. SF2 Champion Edition was in the arcade. This isn't Turbo, right? Champion Edition is just Street Fighter 2 that has playable bosses and playable mirror matches. Am I right? I'm trying to remember because there's also like Championship Edition, which is the Genesis version, which is a bit different. And then after that comes Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which has the bosses playable and is also bumped up in speed. There's a confusing part on the Genesis one where it's like, oh, what was the Genesis version of the game? We'd almost have to fire that up to see what the heck Championship Edition on Genesis was. And you know what? I think it was just Street Fighter 2. I think that was like the first Street Fighter game on Genesis, and they just called it something different. I think it was probably Turbo? So he's likely talking about the arcade version. It was when the bosses were first playable, and they allowed for mirror matches, and that was about it. I think there might have been some slight balance changes to SF2. So it's like, this is pretty much Street Fighter 2, you know?
ファイター2ダッシュかな。チャンピオンエディション。
When's the last
Whoa, really? Really?
time you
ストリートファイター2ダッシュかな。チャンピオンエディション。
I'm actually surprised Mats would say Alpha 2. That's a great take. Matsumoto seems like the dude that's very like that's very into the street style, right, of what Street Fighter is setting up for Street Fighter 6, and also what Street Fighter 3 was also trying to execute, right? The very like urban street style. And it's funny he would say Alpha 2. But you know what? I respect that. Because Alpha 2 is truly a Street Fighter game. It is. There is some questionable conversation of like how much Street Fighter is actually in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, right? How much Street Fighter 3 is like other Street Fighters, and it's the most different of all of them. Of all the gameplay of all the Street Fighter games, it is very different. But if we're talking about Alpha 2, I think I agree with him. I think I like Alpha 2, not just in the way the game feels, but I think I like Alpha 2 in the presentation and the visuals and the stages. And to me, before I liked Street Fighter 3 a lot, Alpha 2 was my favorite. But I'm not gonna go back. Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, in my opinion, is the best Street Fighter game because it is the most different. Because it's the one that takes the biggest risks and is the weirdest of all of them. I love Third Strike, obviously. But before that, it was 100% Street Fighter Alpha 2. Alpha 2 was the defining Street Fighter game.
When's the last time you played the original Street Fighter?
空港で
ちょっといろいろ
ちょっと
Last week at the airport.
At the airport?
Have you ever played with the pressure pads?
Yes.
What was the biggest improvement Street Fighter 2 made over Street Fighter 1?
キャラクターがいっぱい使えるところかな、
What's the biggest
You can control the fucking game. I think that's the when you can actually control the characters this time. Street Fighter 1 fucking sucks, man. I have to play Street Fighter 1 again. We need to. We need to try to beat Street Fighter 1 again. It's been a very long time.
improvement Street Fighter 6 makes over Street Fighter 5?
いろんなモードがあるところ。
フットワークもいいね
What's the biggest lesson that
They said online and mode, so online and then like single player and options. Yeah, that sounds about right.
took from Street Fighter 5?
作ってる側にも多分ちょっと遊び心というか、なんか、対戦格闘ゲームを作るだけじゃなくて面白いゲームを作ろうと思う気持ち。
コミュニケーションと
Does Street Fighter 6 have training mode at launch?
もちろん。
Yes.
What about fight money?
とマネーという概念自体はちょっとないかな。
What about
There's no concept of fight money at this time. Really?
in-game ads?
まだ秘密。
What are modern controls?
ワン操作とは
No fight money. It probably doesn't need it. There's a currency of some kind you earn in the game. We've seen it. I don't think it's going to apply to like fight, like in the same way that fight money was. Yeah, it's probably a character currency, right?
なんていうのかな。必殺技の入力を簡単にしてすぐに対戦のやり取りが楽しめるようにするためのコントロール。
How many control modes are there?
3.
バーシャル3つ。
So we have classic, we have modern. What's the third?
そう、ダイナミックというモードがあります。
The dynamic is the Master's Paradise.
What's that?
後で遊んでみてください。
Do you remember the first time you saw Daigo's Moment 37?
いつだろうね。でも当時見てた気がします。
リアルタイム
リアルタイムで。
What was your reaction?
すげえ
すごいなの一言です。
What about the first time you saw Washigi-san's Evo moment?
もうただただ爆笑しました。
彼らしい
そう。ちょっと泣いちゃった。
What's the idea behind Battle Hub?
みんながこう集まってストリートファイターの情報を交換できたり交流できる場所。
Yeah, they're not trying to like doll up Battle Hub for being this new innovative thing, because it's not. The nicest part about Battle Hub is that it just worked. You know, you finally got a lobby system that was essentially, you know, the same thing that had appeared in a lot of fighting games that had already been around for quite some time, but it worked. This time things actually did what they were supposed to do, and they didn't take a huge amount of time to do them. Weird that has not really existed. There's always been huge tribulations or trials that have essentially happened as a result of these big lobbies and things just not working correctly.
みんながこう集まってストリートファイターの情報を交換できたり交流できる場所。
Aside from competing in matches, what's the most fun thing you can do in Battle Hub?
本当にエモートとかね、チャットとか使ってコミュニケーション取れるとこと、まだね秘密があるんで、それはもうちょっと待ってください。ワイワイできる。
Do you plan on adding more classic games to play in Battle Hub?
あります。
When did the team come up with the idea for
That's
dynamic commentators in the matches?
一番最初から書いてましたね。
Damn, from the beginning in 2018. So I've heard a lot of things about Street Fighter 6's development. So they're saying that the overall concept for the game started in like 2018 is when they began development. So this is going to be like a 4 or 5 year old development cycle for this game. But just off of the way the passing by of what things have dropped over these years, what we've heard about Street Fighter 6 for so many years, it even was before that, right? That there was even more time ahead of time than 2018, that Street Fighter 6 was actually in development, you know, where there was definitely things already going down before that. And the game was supposed to launch much earlier than it did, but it didn't because there were some pretty big adjustments made internally at Capcom around that time frame. Who knows, right? Who knows how many iterations and versions of Street Fighter 6 they actually went through? But we already know that Street Fighter 5 went through several iterations and several different developers before it eventually dropped in the way it did.
2018年。
Did the development team look at any sports video games for inspiration of how to implement it?
なんか多分検証とか実験とかの参考にはしたけど、まあ丸ままそれをやろうと思ったわけじゃない。
Who has the least realistic hair on the Street Fighter 6 roster?
ガイルじゃない。
Guile, yeah. I was about to
You know
say.
he's getting up there in age. Is he going bald by any chance?
それはもう全然大丈夫です。
Does Ken dye his hair?
ケンね、なんか染めてるっていう話を昔聞きましたね。なので眉毛の色が黒いっていう。
Why do you think Ken and
Wow, they straight acknowledged it. That Ken actually is not a natural blonde.
Ryu were the first characters in Street Fighter?
なんでなんだろうね。作った人の名前はそのまま入ってるので、西山さんの名前と入ってるんで、まあでも空手というかね、道着を着たキャラクターが世界のキャラクターを倒してるっていうかっこいいちょっとシリアスなストーリーがあったからかなと思います。
Are they really in their 60s now?
60代いってるキャラクターもいるけど、竜とか別に60代じゃないです。
As Dhalsim gets older, do his limbs start losing elasticity like an old sock?
靴下みたい。
むしろ伸びるようになります。
What about Blanca? Does he start having power outages?
いや、もうより電気が出るようになりますよ。
How do you deal with fighters getting older?
Like an old sock. I like it.
Actual birthdays with years listed.
一応シリーズは進むごとに年は取ってます。ただ今のその現実の世界の時間軸とはちょっと違うので、はい。
That's a good way to put it, yeah, because Street Fighter, I think Ryu was born in like the 60s or some shit. There is definitely a huge disparity when it comes to how old actually are these characters, because by the time, you know, Street Fighter 3 rolls along, they're already in their 30s and shit. They're like in their mid-30s. Even at this point, I think the Street Fighter characters like Chun and Ryu and Ken are supposed to be somewhere around their like 40s to mid-40s or something like that. Like they're getting there.
年齢とそれが一致してるわけじゃないかもしれないですね。
Do you think you'll ever need to update their birthdays so in 20 years we don't have 80-year-old Ryu and Ken fighting each other?
面白いからね、いつかはやりたいと思います。はい。すぐにはやらないと思います。
Can a Street Fighter game exist without Ryu, or would fans be too upset?
なんか起こるということじゃなくて、なんかいるのは
Imagine a Street Fighter game without him because he's always there.
当たり前な感じじゃないですか。
そこにいる。
Yeah.
What's the longest Ryu has gone without thinking about fighting?
どうなんでしょう。
I think he's always thinking about fighting.
ただ水羊羹を
Maybe not when he's eating.
What does he do in his free time that doesn't involve training?
瞑想してます。
Meditating.
What's Ken's deal in Street Fighter 6? He's given off kind of a different vibe this time.
詳しいことはワールを
You learn more when you get a chance to play World Tour. Of course. Ken is the most intriguing character story-wise.
読んでもらえると分かると思います。
What did you think about all those Hobo Ken memes?
面白い。
They were
面
funny.
白いと思います。
Good.
So did Eliza throw him out or what?
それはないですけど。
No, but I see why people would think that.
What would Ryu say if Ken asked him if he could come over for dinner? Sure, you can! What did you think about when people called that
That was good.
Ryu skin Hot Ryu?
なんか人気出てよかったなと思いました。
かなり人気。
Is Ken still...
Yeah, I remember us talking about that too. Us being like, I remember all of us were pissed that Hot Ryu was not the default character in Street Fighter 5, where it was like Hot Ryu was like an Amazon pre-order exclusive or some weird shit where you only could get Hot Ryu early on by certain specific means. And it was clear that like Ryu's design in Street Fighter 5 was just the same shit again. And then they had like, yeah, it was like a PS4 exclusive skin. And then they had Hot Ryu. And it was Ryu with a beard and no shirt on, and it was fucking awesome looking. It was like, dude, this is way better than the default looking Ryu. Like, what the hell? I'm glad they went with it in Street Fighter 6.
really good at cooking pasta dishes?
得意です。バンバンですね。
Does Ken look back at his brainwash time as Violent Ken the way we might look back at a time where we had too much to drink?
覚えてないんじゃないかなと思います。
別人格。
So exactly like when we have too much to drink.
その通りね。
Who's the bad guy in Street Fighter 6?
まだ発表してません。
What did you think about that Street Fighter movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme?
最高です。
大好き。
大好き。
What about the game that was based on it?
2本あるけど両方好き。
Damn, devs are educated. The fact that Nakayama-san knows that there are two different games that were released around Street Fighter, the movie, the game. There's the arcade version, which is bonkers and fucking wild. And then there's the PlayStation/Saturn version, I think, the Saturn version, that is more like Super Turbo. That was essentially designed to not be like the arcade game, designed to play a bit more like what people remember from Super Turbo. We've played both of them on this channel. And to be frank, the absolute bonkers fucking insane arcade version is better. We already have Super Turbo. This is the console version is just a less fun version of Super Turbo, a less good-looking version of Super Turbo, and the arcade version is fucking wild. The game is insane.
What about the game that was based on it?
2本あるけど両方好き。
What about the title? Street Fighter, the movie, the game.
わかりやすい。
わかりやすいね。
Do you have any thoughts on Street Fighter 2010 Final Fight?
あれも面白いゲームだと思います。
Was that really Ken in that game?
Oh, this is good.
そうなるかもしれないですね。未来の話なんで。
Why did
I would just say it's alternate universe, right? I am one of the few people, and I have a full playthrough of me playing through Street Fighter 2010, the Final Fight, on YouTube, and we did it back with I think the Ken Legacy when he was coming out in Smash. I actually beat that game. It's fucking hard, but weirdly enough, my personal history with it goes back to the week it came out, because I saw it in a Target and I was like, oh my god, there's a Street Fighter game on Nintendo. I can't believe it. And then I got the game and I was so horrifically disappointed because it was not a Street Fighter game, but it had Street Fighter characters in it. It was so weird. So I was one of the ones that they bamboozled. They specifically called it Street Fighter 2010 The Final Fight just to bamboozle kids like me. So when I saw it behind the glass, I was like, ooh, there's a Street Fighter game. Mom, can I have it? Mom was lucky enough to, I caught her on a good day. So I'm the victim. Yes, I am. So they did a good job. Granted, the game's a lot better than I made it out to be, than just being a Street Fighter game that it wasn't. The game is actually pretty good. It's super hard, but it's the weirdest shit in the ever, where Ken's a scientist and he's after some gack or some shit and he's trying to murder aliens. It's worth checking out.
the team go for a street art aesthetic this time around?
ユーザーさんとすごくマッチしてると思ったから。
What's your favorite character theme in any Street Fighter game?
ボクサー。
ベガのディクテーターの曲も結構好
Does Guile's theme really go with everything?
き。そうです、本当です。はい
Do you think it would go well even with this interview?
もちろん流してください。
Does Street Fighter 6's visual aesthetics also influence the music?
はい、します。めちゃめちゃします。
強い。
How many times do you think you've heard that song that plays during the walkouts?
めちゃめちゃ聞いてる。多分
100 times a day.
Is it challenging to balance a roster of characters?
大変ですね。時間がかかります。
Is it easier now that you can release online patches instead of having to release like 6 different versions
Yes.
of the game?
一概に簡単とは言えないけど、
Yes.
いい正義。
The method of patching back in the day, right, is it either didn't happen or you had to go and release new versions of the game within 6 to 8 months. And that happened, right? Like you had to make a new game and that new game came out within a year after the last new game.
いいクオリティを皆さんに遊んでほしいという部分ではやりやすくなったので、
いいもの出して。
はい。
Which Street Fighter stage would be the coolest place to just hang out?
スポーツの DJ ステージ。
ああ、同じやろ。
あれ
そう、なんかそこそれ。
Who's your main in Street Fighter 6?
自分が使うのはまだ発表しないキャラクター
Favorite
です。
character hasn't been announced yet, really.
はキンバ。
Why haven't Max and Scott from the Street Fighter 2 intro ever appeared as playable characters?
ゲームとしては、まあ今出てないのでいつか出るかもしれないですよね。
What would your victory screen quote be in Street Fighter 2?
自分の勝利ゼリフ、今日はラッキーだった。
まあこんなもんかな。
Did anyone ever end up defeating Shenlong?
シェンロンともしかしているんですかね。シェンロンどうなんでしょうね。はい。
So somebody must have had a chance, right?
あったかもしれない。これからあるかもしれない。
Have there ever been discussions of adding Shenlong as a character just to capitalize on the joke?
入ってるかもしれない。
Gouken exists.
What's your favorite crossover game that involves Street Fighter?
コンバーサス SNK2 だから。ありますよ。
Does Ryu have any fun stories from his time competing in Super Smash Bros?
ああ、リュウにとってよかったこと、体力回復アイテムの食べ物をいっぱい食べれたことです。
Did he make friends with any of the other characters?
あ、なったと思います。
社交戦。
はい、社交
He learned how to
Does Ryu have
socialize.
the most connections of any video game character ever? I mean, fought the entire Smash roster, Marvel characters, Tekken characters, SNK characters, Fortnite. Like, is he basically video game version of Kevin Bacon?
そうだと思います。 いろいろ強いやつを求めていろんなところに行ってるので。
Asura. Forgot about Asura's Wrath. Power Rangers as well.
覚えてるとか置いといて、すごい強いやつと戦ってるっていう記憶はある。
Tatsunoko. Monster Hunter. Like, Ryu has been around the fucking block.
Were you disappointed that Tekken Cross Street Fighter couldn't happen?
その時ね、チームにいなくて一般のユーザーさんだったけど、なんか遊びたかったなとは思います。
Was it at least a nice consolation prize to see Akuma appear in Tekken 7?
なんか強くてかっこよくしてもらえたんでよかったなと思いました。
よく言います
よく、
鉄拳やのに号泣。
What series would you most want to see Street Fighter crossover with next?
自分は DC コミックスすごい好きなんで、DC コミックスさん、マーベルさんと3社でやらせてもらったらいいですね。面白そうですけど、難しいね。
You know,
Wow. You know what? I love this quote. You know why? Because it leads to like the hope of a future. And it's not even like, oh, we're getting a new Marvel game. You know what that feels like to me? That just feels like isolating Capcom down to a versus this specific thing isn't really a good idea anymore.
DC コミックスさん、マーベルさんと3社でやらせてもらったらいいですね。面白そうですけど、難しい。
Really different.
you know, NetherRealm has the rights to DC Comics. Could you ever see a Mortal Kombat crossover happening?
面白いと思うけど、なんかずっとって首引っこ抜かれたらちょっと怖いと思いました。
And this has always been the thing that has prevented Capcom from crossing over with Mortal Kombat, right? The fact that Mortal Kombat comes with an inherent expectation. You don't want Ryu or Chun-Li to get decapitated.
違うところでやってる。画面が。
はい、見えないところに言ってました。
Do you have a favorite fighting game besides Street Fighter?
あります。リアルバウトガロ伝説2。
Damn. I thought he was going to say a modern fighting game. I was like, what is he going to say? And Real Bout, Fatal Fury 2. This is why I think the next iteration of a Capcom fighting game will likely be versus SNK. You know, I really think that if there's something that will most likely come as the relationship, I don't think I specifically want that, but it would be super cool, especially if a Capcom versus SNK 3 did happen, where it's not just another Street Fighter game. And that's been kind of an issue with CVS 1 and CVS 2. They're just Street Fighter games with SNK characters, you know?
昨日も遊びました。
僕それとこの間 KOF97 にやりました。
Which Marvel character would fit best on the Street Fighter 6 roster?
キルモンガーは作りたい。
How will players experience the story of Street Fighter 6?
ワールドツアーモードでは、ちゃんとしたね。
But they also have arcade endings.
楽しめて、まあそれのこうなんていうのかな、ショートみたいなのが。
Oh, there's like a shortened version in arcade mode. How funny.
Do you plan on adding the following to the game post-launch? 1. Fighters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stages.
はい。
Yeah.
Commentators.
したいと思ってる。うん。
Modes.
いや、そうと思ってる。
Maybe.
Who's more mysterious, Akuma or Q?
Q だと思う。
Q.
So Akuma's birthday, likes, dislikes, and special abilities are all listed as unknown. Does that make you sad?
どうなんだろうね。本人が言いたくないんだったらそれはいいことなんじゃないの？
Have you tried asking him?
彼にね聞いたくないんですよ。怖くて聞けないです。
So one thing that's not listed as unknown for Akuma is his weight. Why can we find out his weight if he's so mysterious, but we can't find out Chun-Li's weight?
教えてくれないんですよ。
言いたくない
言いたくないんです。
So Ryu's special abilities are listed as hitchhiking and being able to sleep anywhere. What would come in more handy? Being able to do that or throw a Hadouken?
波動拳は便利なんじゃないの？
ペンペンで捉えるのに結構
For when you witness those real life street fights.
あ、そう。あと高いところに物が引っかかっちゃった時取れるかなと思ってる。
Alright, it's time to come clean. Who's the wise guy who designed Jury's Battle Hub camera angle? How does it feel to be back on Xbox?
いや嬉しい。
そういろんな人に
嬉しい。
So why is it coming to PlayStation 4 but not Xbox One?
下すぎる要
あんまり
件が
言わない方がいい。大人の
That shit ain't happening.
事情。
そうそうそう
Will new Street Fighter games ever come back to Nintendo consoles?
Ooh.
あるんじゃない？
We definitely want to do it. Oh, damn, dude. Yeah, I think there definitely is a path for a Switch 2 future. If they can scale Monster Hunter Rise to be on a Switch, right? Then they likely, and that was also the RE engine. This is also an RE engine game. I would not be surprised. They made Mortal Kombat 11 run on a friggin' Switch.
You refer to the Shadowloo bosses. Do you refer to them as Bison, Balrog, Vega, and Sagat, or Boxer, Claw, Dictator, and Sagat?
日本
日本の名前で今
Does Claw take a lot of selfies?
自分で撮らなくて撮れって撮らせるよ。
いい感じのこと
Can you do an impression of your favorite special move to perform in Street Fighter 6?
それに来るのか
キンバリー勝利ポーズ
やってて
This is good.
Were any real-life locations inspirations for stages in Street Fighter 6?
あります。今回のメトロシティのステージとかは LA でね取材に行ってグラフィティとか撮りに行ったので、はい。
Which Street Fighter character?
I think the place that Kenny goes and gets his street tacos is a direct representation of Metro City for Street Fighter 6, to be completely honest. I have been there a couple times, and the place that Kenny goes and gets his delicious street tacos, arguably the greatest tacos I've ever had in my entire life, feels like the scene in Terminator 1 where Kyle Reese comes out of the Terminator time portal and he lands on the streets of Los Angeles. I feel like, oh, he's right over there. It would be the exact same location.
Who would do the best if they were dumped into the world of Monster Hunter?
実際なんかスキンでも出してもらったらウォーキーはいけると思います。二酸化ライズで一の世界に行きました。食べてない。
What about if they were dumped into the world of Resident Evil?
キャミーはいけるかも。
ああ、いいね
Who has the coolest stage entrance animation in Street Fighter 6?
ジュリは結構自分好きなので、1P サイドと 2P サイドで一緒にジュリを選ぶと面白いのでやってみてください。
Is your favorite arcade still around?
好きなゲーセンは残ってます。はい。
ちなさんも潰れました
You want to go play Street Fighter 2 there?
行きますか。行きたいですけど秋葉原なんで。
Well, maybe we can hit one up here.
もちろんもちろん。行きましょう。
Okay, hold up, but that's a different video. Do you think any Street Fighter characters could compete in another sport on a professional level?
ダルシムバスケット向いてると思う。
Who is your favorite new character in Street Fighter 6?
発表されてる中で言うと自分はジェイミーからですね。
ジェイミー、キンバリー
Announced characters. Who's your favorite new character in Street Fighter 6? The characters we've announced.
Play in the story of Street Fighter 6.
主人公は主人公なんだけども、なんかルークっていろんな人と絡んでいって輝くタイプの人間なんで、本当にワールドツアーモードでも、自分の分身のアバターと絡んでいくことによってこう魅力が。
I like Luke. Yeah, Luke gets a lot of hate because of Street Fighter 5. But I really like Luke in Street Fighter 6. I like his personality. I like what they did with him.
Why was it important to include him as the final DLC character for Street Fighter 5?
そう主人公だったから先に6を作ってたんで。
When you decide to make a new game, is it difficult to decide which characters from the past game don't make the jump over to the new one?
難しいですね。まあ作れる数に限りがあるんで、まあそれはもう全キャラ作りたいけど、時間も
Yeah, I'd imagine a Street Fighter 6 character might take like twice as much manpower as a Street Fighter 5 character at this point. You know, there's just too much fidelity and detail keeps getting higher and higher.
はい、それは結構難しいことです。
Who was the hardest character to cut from Street Fighter 5 when you came over to Street Fighter 6?
コーディは実は個人的には入れたかったんだけど入れれなかったですね。まあワールドツアーの舞台がメトロシーだったってこともあったりするんで、なんか世界観的にもストーリー的にも
Rip Cody.
魅力的なキャラだったんで、できればやりたかった。
He's already in 2 fucking games, you know? He did it in 4 and 5.
Are there any bonus stages in Street Fighter 6?
あります。
People have to be really careful where they park their cars in the universe of Street Fighter.
そうですね。すぐ壊されちゃうと思います。
Have you ever tried punching a car?
どうなんだろう。あるかな。松本さんある。
Of course I have.
How did that go?
痛かった
So was that because of Street Fighter, or was that you were just angry?
いやドア閉まらへんなと
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. This has been a really fun interview, and it's been just a really exciting day for me overall.
But me, it was Tuesday.
That's fun, right? It's just fun to see that the devs are making the game they want to make. It's just fun to see that the devs are just enjoying their time getting this stuff done. These are the same dudes that essentially turned Street Fighter V into a great game, you know, a substantially better game than it was at launch. And it's good that Game Informer is able to catch that a little bit.